Welcome everyone to another CTC Software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, the Director of BIM Development here at CTC Software, and today I'm excited to continue with you the ROI Calculator series that we've been doing, talking about how we can improve our workflows and actually get a return on the investment in the tools. Today's focus, we'll be talking about project cleanup, focusing specifically on text lines, line styles, line patterns, fill patterns, things like that. We're going to talk about how we can make this as efficient as is possible and save us as much time and headache as possible and improve our quality of life. So as always, we like to keep an eye on the questions window when we're here live in the webinar. So if you've got questions about this topic, we encourage you to throw them over there or write them into the questions window and we'll answer them. We also save a large QA session for the end in case there's questions that don't fit well within the context. And also, of course, we keep these webinars recorded. So if you happen to be watching this recording on YouTube, thank you very much. We appreciate that. We hope that you like it enough to subscribe and kind of show up for other CTC events and whatnot. So with that, let's jump into the content for today. So this is a whole series that we're going through here. And in previous webinars, we've talked about and demonstrated other powerful tools, and specifically a particular tool on our website. And the purpose of it is to showcase areas where you can get some potential automation within your workflows, specifically by using our suites, our tools. And the goal here is to help you realize where you can get a return on the investment in our tools and actually perhaps expose to you areas where like you may not know about specific workflows that our tools can do and show you where you could improve upon your daily workflows. Now, in this session, we're going to talk specifically to BIM managers. And most of us in the BIM management space, we're often juggling multiple things. We have, projects to set up, we've got content to create, we've got projects to maintain after they're set up and tracking down problems and putting out fires, and we're doing all kinds of things. There's a lot of challenges. The problem is we're trying to actually maintain project models. And if we don't maintain them, we actually cause ourselves more work in the future, which is kind of odd because if I don't do work, it causes me more work and that's just frustrating, but we don't have time to do the work. So because we're doing other work, right? So the goal today is to talk about how we've got some focused tools that can help you with some of these really annoying and tiresome tasks. So we're gonna be going through that live today. I'm going to cover a few things. I want to talk about the issue that we're focusing on today. I'm going to talk about it in detail. I'm going to outline the manual steps for the workflow that we would do normally. I'm going to demonstrate an automated workflow, and then I'm going to talk with you about next steps, things you can do to actively use this tool today on your projects. So first off, let's talk about what is this issue? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? The real reason why this happens most of the time, the most common cause of this is somebody has exploded CAD files in our Revit project model. That's the main kind of thing here. Now, there's other things we can do to help kind of interrupt that exploding of CAD files, but let's say it's happened. Someone's exploded CAD files. They've imported a bunch of details, they've exploded them, and now what happens is we've got all kinds of text types, all kinds of line types and line styles and fill patterns and trash that's been introduced into our Revit model. The problem with this is those new styles, I'm air quoting new, the new styles here, they're not really controlled by our visibility graphics. When we publish and print, they're not really a part of our standards there either, so publishing and printing can become problematic. That's kind of a problem. It's annoying because now my graphic standards don't work and I'm spending time fixing output drawings that look like garbage, and it's frustrating. The other big problem that we see here is that just general navigation for the end users within type selection lists gets way less efficient because now they're scrolling through a list that's 150 long instead of scrolling through my standardized list that's maybe 20 long for different kinds of things. Or in the case of my text types, I have 4 text types. That's all I have. But I've seen exploded CAD files inside of Revit projects where all of a sudden that list gets to be 100 long and my text types, because of my naming conventions, they show up later in the list and it's really frustrating and it becomes very difficult for my end users to navigate. So they're just less efficient overall, and that's costing me time that I don't realize it's costing me. It's costing me project budget dollars. We'll talk a bit about that in a minute here. The other big problem is that if anybody ever does a transfer project standards from these projects, which end users tend to do a lot, when they do this, this just propagates that garbage to another model and recreates the same problems. So it behooves me, the BIM manager, to take care of it. But there's some manual steps that we have to go through to actually kind of fix this problem. And there's two sort of options that we can go through for these manual steps. There's ramifications to these two choices. First one, the better of the two, you open the model, and within the option one process, you find the views that contain these non-standard items. You select the objects in those views that are using these non-standard styles, and then you swap them, and then you purge those non-standard styles out of the project. That's option one. That's the cleanest way. It retains the most possible fidelity. But this is also very time-consuming to do by hand. And it's really inconvenient when we have better things on our work list to do. We typically don't go through and do this option. Instead, what we'll often do is use option two, where we open the model with the common step one, and then we just purge the non-standard styles. And what that does is destroys the visibility graphics fidelity of what was imported. And it greatly inconveniences the end user, so when they start to complain about things, then we deal with complaining users because of the messed up graphics, and we end up spending probably more time, even though it took us less time up front, right? So that's not really very ideal. The whole searching through the project and trying to find these objects and trying to correctly swap them and maintain our standards and kind of keep the models as healthy as we can for this small, simple thing, this problem that gets created from users importing garbage or importing things from outside my corporate standards, it's cumbersome. So instead, I want to talk about a workflow that can save some time. Now, my default numbers are very, very low on this return on investment calculator, but I'm going to go through the return on investment calculator. We're going to talk about this, and I encourage you to follow along and put your numbers in. Put your values in there and kind of see what you think about kind of how this affects you, all right? So I'm going to go to our website here. I'm on ctcsoftware.com, and in just a moment, I'm actually going to be demonstrating the tool that I'm about to talk about here in use. But I'm on ctcsoftware.com. I'm going over here to the resources and down into the ROI calculator. We've explained this particular tool a couple of times in this series, but I'm going to go over it again real quick here. The purpose of this is to let you pick sort of what major trades we're working with, whether it's playing in the dirt or whether we're building buildings. Either way, whichever side you're working on, there's workflows that are specific to you inside that list. In this list here, we're talking about project cleanup today, working with specifically text and line styles and fill patterns and items like that. So text and line styles is sort of the first little bit of this. Now with this, my numbers, again, I think are actually very, very low on this. So actual time spent in a project model trying to clean stuff up, let's say it's 45 minutes. Now, let's say you only do this on 10 projects per year. For most of my BIM managers that are looking for an automated solution here, that's probably unrealistic. Most of you are probably doing this more on the factor of like 4 or 5 a month. And if it's only one of you doing this task, great, that's fine. Depending on whatever your billable rate is on those projects, that has a cost. And in this case, that cost for doing that particular activity is $4,500 if we're talking about a $100 billable rate. If we are strictly talking about how much you are paid per hour, that's the true cost, the visible cost. Let's just say it's $25 an hour. Let's say it's $30 an hour. Oops, that's not right. $30 an hour, whatever that is, that's the actual cost on paper. But if we're talking about opportunity cost, right, we were talking about that in the very first part of the series, like when you're doing this task, you're not doing other tasks, you're not being productive in other ways, or maybe you're billing to a project that has its own cost, and that's where the billable rate on projects can come from, right? Your time when spent doing this task is not spent doing other tasks, or when you're doing this, you're billing to a project. That all has cost, that all has ramifications to it. And whatever that cost is, if you're doing this by hand on a project-by-project basis, that can be expensive. So let's talk about the tool that we're going to be focusing on here. The tool we're focusing on is a tool called Type Swapper. It exists in the BIM Manager suite. And by using this tool instead of it taking however much time it takes, you could be saving 40 hours a year in this case with this particular number set, 40 hours a year on this task, which turns into a cost savings of about $6,000. Because this tool can do the exact same thing. Instead of 45 minutes, it can do the same thing per project in less than 5 minutes. You might find that it's even less, but let's just say it's 5 minutes to be on the safe side here. So we're going to go take a look at this type swapper tool. And again, you can play with these numbers. If you say, nah, Sean, every time I do this, it takes me an hour and a half or an hour, right? I can put in here a full hour. That'll change these numbers down here. If you're like an hour and a half, well, what is that, 90 minutes? I can put 90 minutes in here, and that changes this time. So however long this particular task takes you, however many times you do this a year, however many people on your team have to do this, and whatever you want it to put in there for the rate that you want to count as your cost, that will give you what the cost is for the task. And that's true for every one of the tasks we talk about here. And then the tool that's recommended and the time it takes within CTC's tool will tell you what your time savings is and what that cost savings is. So this is that return on the investment for the tool. You buy the tool, then you spend your whatever time it actually is. This is how much you are actually saving by doing that, depending on what your numbers are. Now let me show you what I mean. Let's actually do this workflow. So I have a project open. I'm not counting the opening time in this because however long it takes to open a project, it takes, and whether you're doing it by hand or with a tool, you still have to open the project. So I'm in here already, and I know this particular project has some issues. I know this because I went up here to draw some detail lines, and I was noticing that I have all kinds of these A layers, B layers inside of here. I have some all kinds of trash. This tells me somebody exploded something in my project because these aren't line styles that I would make. These are layer names that come out of the AutoCAD space. There's also some other ones inside of here that probably came from a different drawing at a different time that's not my standard either. I can recognize this visually because I know what my standard is. I like using these guys here, detail 01, 2, whatever, center hidden. These are the ones that I want people to be using. But there's a bunch of garbage that made its way in. Now, I don't know what view they made their way into. Those detail lines could be in any of the views in my project. It could be in a code plan, a life safety plan, could be in a ceiling plan, could be in a drafting view. I don't know. So if I really want to go clean this up right, I have to go do that, or I'd have to go to just manage additional settings, line styles, and start purging out those line styles and hope for the best. It's not going to delete the lines. It's going to delete the style that it was using, which means it's just going to go back to the default lines style, the master style inside of there. But I can do that way more efficiently. So I'm going to demonstrate the efficient workflow here. That's the goal, is to take a look at the automated workflow inside of Revit. So what I'm going to do is use the type swapper tool here that is on the BIM Managers suite. Again, I'm talking to BIM Managers today. With type swapper specifically, I know about these layers. These layers have crept up before. I've seen them. So if I go to line styles here, this particular tab, I can simply load a selection of standardized swaps that I've done before, and it knows to swap from one thing to another since I've pre-programmed how I want that to swap across. I did that one time, and now this is going to just do it for me. In fact, I've also gone through in my template, and I had pre-checked line styles that were, and I'm air quoting on my side, approved, that I know about, that I expect to be there. So I can simply sort my list here real quick and get all of my non-approved line styles kind of all grouped together. And you can see here in my list, there's actually quite a few things that got brought into my project that are all non-standard, non-approved line styles. The ones that are approved are this much shorter list down here. And what this means is users have to scroll through all of these potentially and buy all of these to find the ones they're supposed to be using. And it's highly likely they're going to choose the ones they're not supposed to. And you can see there's actually quite a few of these in use across my project. This tool goes and finds all of the instances where these are actually in use at play. Now, when I loaded my selection, I already had preset these swap twos, this swap to setting within that file, so it knows already what to do. And all I have to do is tell it to go swap those line styles. And it's going to rip through my project. It's going to find every instance of every one of those line styles, and it's going to swap them out for the ones that it is supposed to be using. If it's in groups, if it's in sketches, It's going to do its best to make that swap. Now, it might be a few where it can't get the rights to it, can't swap it, but for the most part, it's going to clean up the vast majority of the stuff that's within my project. Might take it a second because it's got a couple thousand line styles to go through and do, but it's going to go ahead and do it, and I could go do something else while it's making that swap. Now, similarly here, there's text types that I could do this for as well. I probably should have done that first, honestly. But the text types has the same thing. I could load a selection. I could have pre-checked which ones were approved, let it do its thing. It's out there just thinking. I'm just going to let that continue to rip here. So that's sort of the automated workflow. You go into the tool, you say, load this selection of pre-mapped stuff because you've already configured it at one point, and you tell it what to swap to. Now, what are your next steps? How can you create that exact same workflow for yourself as easy as possible? What I recommend doing is opening up the worst possible project that you know about in your company, the one that's got the worst garbage imported into it. Start there because it's going to give you the greatest base of stuff that you can use. Now, in my case, mine's actually got most of what it needs already. Is that done yet? It's not done yet. That's fine. Nope, it's not done yet. Let's just open up another session here of Revit. We're just going to get another one opened up and use that instead. So I'm going to open up a project model that I know has a lot of stuff in it, and I'm going to basically build up a little bit of those standards here in front of you so you can see exactly how to put this together yourself. So I'm opening up Revit. I'm opening up a project. It doesn't matter the version that you're in because this transcends versions. I can use those settings in any particular model that I want to be using this in. Go ahead and open up all of my work sets, get everything ready to go, and I'm in there, and I'm going to be able to now use the type swapper tool to basically do all the things that I need to do, all the swapping that I need to do. So in here, doesn't matter the view you're in, the tool is going to look across the entire project automatically. You're going to open up type swapper, and it's going to start with effectively nothing really set inside of here. So I'm going to see all of my dimension styles, my text types here. We'll start here on this one because it's super simple. You'll notice that I do already have checked the approved option here. This is checked because I've already done this in the model and it's actually saved to the model. This would normally start unchecked, meaning it's not really a part of my standards, and I've intentionally gone through and at some point checked that these were a part of my standards and the ones that I want to be in use. That way, I can very quickly identify items that are not a part of my standard. Now, anything that's not a part of my standard here that shows up that's unknown will be unchecked. And these items here, I noticed there's 17 instances of this in my model. All you do is you go over here to the right and you choose what you want to swap those text types out for that are in your standards list. So in this case, my 1/8" Arial is my default, and I'm just going to use that consistently. I don't even know what this is, and frankly, I don't care. I'm just going to make it 1/8" Arial. Over here, there's a Roman S. Roman S is an AutoCAD SHX-based line style or text style. I can't actually use that anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and use, well, Arial because it's my standard. Actually, not 1/4 inch, 1/8" Arial. So I'm basically setting this up. Now, once I've done this, and in fact, my schedule default here, this is one that Revit just gives me, but I never really want to use it. There's no instances in my project of that right now, and that's fine. If there were, guess what? I'm going to swap it out for 1/8" Arial, which is my typical default for all of my annotations. You might want something different, but in my case, this 1/8" Arial, and of course, because of how Revit works, 1/8" Arial automatically scales per the view that you're in, so it automatically sets the scale there. So that will generally just get this to size correctly for a printed sheet. That's the intent there. So once I've got these all set up, what you do is you save your selection. You save it out to a standards location, someplace on your network, someplace centralized, so you can use it on multiple computers if you need to. I've already got one here, my exploded CAD settings. This is for typically what I see when CAD gets exploded in my project, and I have a type swapper text types file that's all set up here ready to go. So I'm just going to overwrite that with these settings. What this does then is when I open up type swapper the next time, instead of me needing to go through one by one with those text types and manually make those swaps again, I can simply load my selection and it goes, oh yeah, I recognize these garbage text types, and it maps them automatically. If these things are coming from other Revit project models and they have other names or other older styles coming from an older project and you want to standardize them, fantastic. This will help you with that because you can pre-program what that swap is supposed to look like. The same process holds true with line styles here. The ability to go through the list and to swap everything out and pre-pick your mappings is great. You go through and check those that are approved or guaranteed to be in a project model, and then you can very quickly sort based on that so that all the approved items or those that are known and controlled get lumped together, and you can go through all the ones that are unknowns that shouldn't be in your project and clean those up however you see fit. So then you just go through and one time you do your mapping, swap it to whatever style it is you want this to go to, and you pick what that should actually be, the closest best possible mapping that you can sort of specify here. You just go through and do that mapping one time, and once again you save your selection, so the next time you need to come in here and do those general base swaps, you once again can simply load in your settings and you'll have your swap to set, so you don't have to manually go through the, oops, I rolled that. That was an accident. Let's try that again. Load. There we go. Using detail 3. So that way you don't have to worry about going through one by one and setting those mappings. You can simply just click swap and let it rip. Let it do its thing. Now, once that swap is complete, I also use this approved list to go through and ultimately delete all of those line styles from my project. I'm going to do a slightly smaller set here. Let's actually go through and do the swap here for these aerial text types. I'm going to go ahead and just tell this to swap down here. It's going to take a minute. See, that happens really quickly when it's just a few items. And once it's done that, I can take these things here, these styles that exist, and simply delete them. I don't have to go to purge unused, wait for that list to load, uncheck everything, find the text types, pick these ones that I want to purge out, and then delete them. I can simply do it right from here, and it goes ahead and purges those from my project, and now my project text list is way, way cleaner, way more efficient, especially if it was, 10, 15, 20 of these when I only really want the 4 or 5. Now, sadly, I don't think I can delete the schedule default. Let's try it. Yeah, I can. Fantastic. So I can delete that one, and I'm just left with the 4 that I really wanted here, and those are now the defaults at play and the available that are at play in my project. And when someone goes to add text, they only see the 4 instead of seeing a list of 50, right? It just makes that process more efficient for them. And my standards are way cleaner as well. All my visibility graphics are nice and clean because they're using my text types. And the same thing holds true with the line styles. Ultimately, after I do that cleanup, I can simply click on delete, and it'll rip through and delete all those from my project. Fill patterns are basically the same way, by the way. I have already approved the ones that I want to be using. Down here, I've got a few that crept into my project, so I'm just going to try and load my default fill pattern selections. Looks like those were recognized from before. So I could click swap. It'll run through my project and swap them, and then once that's done, I can delete the either unused or selected from my project, and it's going to go ahead and purge those out. The fill patterns has an extra little step here because you can actually delete unused, and it'll look through and say, are they used in filled regions anywhere or in materials anywhere? And if they are truly unused, they're not in use anywhere, it'll actually purge them out of the project and really clean the project up. So the list of fill patterns is, well, way more manageable. It cleans up the garbage. So that's really nice. The ability to go clean this stuff up nice and easy throughout the project environment, okay? So with that, you set this up one major time, and then you only have to deal with those that are just unrecognized periodically. Like in my line styles, if there was a new one that crept in, I would load my defaults and then handle the few that were a problem and resave. So in the future, it's already mapped out. Huge, huge time saver. That's your next step. So you can install the Manager Suite. You can try Type Swapper on one of the worst possible projects you have. Go through it one time. You're going to spend the time anyway trying to find them, but if you spend your time mapping one time, once you've done that mapping and you save it, the next time, lightning fast, because it's going to happen. It's going to do all the delete. It's going to do everything that it's supposed to be doing, and it's going to be way more efficient. So with that, I'm going to say here, thank you for those of you who are not going to hang out for the QA session. I am going to have a QA session here in just a minute, but for those of you who aren't going to hang for that, or those of you who are watching this on a recording, thank you. We appreciate that. We hope that you found this information very meaningful. We hope that you can begin to use this tool, and for that matter, the ROI calculator, to your benefits, that you can actually start getting time back and investing that time elsewhere where you're actually needed to do those tasks instead of manual, menial, repetitive junk cleaning up projects.